Watch what happens when Senator John Kennedy looks Representative Maxine Waters in the eye and asks the one devastating question that unravels her entire 34-year political career: who got the money? Representative Maxine Waters confidently marched into the bustling hearing room and casually remarked to her loyal staffer, speaking just loud enough for two eager reporters seated in the very front row to clearly overhear, that this proceeding would be over quickly. She dismissed her inquisitor by stating that he was not even on the Financial Services Committee and therefore knew absolutely nothing about the complex world of banking. Fast forward exactly 45 minutes later, Senator John Kennedy calmly placed her own husband's highly revealing financial disclosure document completely flat on the polished wooden table. He deliberately turned the printed side outward so that every single television camera in the room could capture it perfectly. Then, he leaned forward and asked her for the 7th distinct time that fateful evening, "Ma'am, who got the money?" She sat there in stunned silence and did not offer an answer. This 7th profound silence was exactly the same as the 6th silence that preceded it. This highly anticipated Senate Banking Committee hearing had been officially scheduled for 2 full weeks. The official title of the session was Financial Services Oversight and Congressional Accountability. Normally, a title that incredibly dry and generic would guarantee a massive room filled with nothing but empty chairs on any given weekday. However, the published witness list contained one specific name that absolutely guaranteed a completely packed viewing gallery: Representative Maxine Waters. She was the powerful ranking member of the prestigious House Financial Services Committee, a formidable 34-year veteran of the United States Congress, a highly influential former committee chair, and the iconic woman who had famously turned the phrase "reclaiming my time" into a viral national catchphrase. The massive hearing room filled up incredibly early that morning. The designated press gallery was strictly standing room only, and 3 major cable television networks had chosen to carry the entire proceeding completely live. The Congressional Black Caucus had even dispatched 4 official observers who sat rigidly in the second row, clutching blank notebooks that they would ultimately never even open. Absolutely everyone in Washington knew that this was not going to be a standard routine oversight hearing. Everyone knew this undeniable fact because the designated questioner for the day was Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana, and John Kennedy simply did not schedule high-profile hearings for mere routine purposes. Waters finally arrived, accompanied by the absolute largest professional entourage the hearing room had witnessed during that entire legislative session. She brought her elite personal attorney, a powerful partner at a prestigious Washington, D.C. law firm who reportedly billed his clients at a staggering $1,100 an hour. She was flanked by 2 former senior staffers who had specifically returned to the Capitol just for this momentous occasion. Her dedicated communications director walked briskly beside her, already rapidly composing defensive tweets on a smartphone. Finally, bringing up the rear was her own grandson, Mikail Moore, a man who had once served as her official chief of staff and who, before this devastating evening was completely over, would desperately wish he had simply stayed home. Representative Waters was 86 years old and had been a continuous, powerful force in the halls of Congress since 1991. She had proudly chaired the powerful House Financial Services Committee. She had remarkably survived being named 4 separate times on the infamous Most Corrupt list compiled by the watchdog group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. She had been formally investigated by the powerful House Ethics Committee and was ultimately cleared of personal wrongdoing, although her grandson had notably not been as fortunate. Over her decades in power, she had aggressively shouted down sitting Treasury secretaries, publicly branded presidents as racist, and aggressively told the Tea Party movement to go straight to hell. She simply did not lose battles in congressional hearing room. In fact, she did not lose battles anywhere she went. She gracefully sat down in the heavy wooden witness chair in the exact same manner a person casually sits on the sofa in their very own living room. She looked completely settled, entirely comfortable, and absolutely certain that she completely owned whatever physical space she chose to occupy. She precisely placed her clear water glass to her immediate right, carefully adjusted the angle of her microphone, and looked directly across the room at Senator Kennedy with the expression of someone waiting for a child to finish a tantrum. Senator Kennedy, however, had arrived a full 40 minutes earlier than she did. He sat quietly at the elevated dais with a simple cup of black coffee, a standard legal pad, and a massive document folder. Sticking out from the top of this folder were 5 distinct, brightly colored tabs that the cameras could easily pick up. One United, family payments, district data, FEC, and slate mailers. A seasoned Senate aide would later remark to the press that Kennedy's folder was easily the thickest document cache she had seen prepared for a single witness hearing in over 3 years. Kennedy calmly sipped his hot coffee. He did not bother to look up at Waters when she made her grand entrance, nor did he look at the flashing cameras. He was intensely focused on reading something written on his legal pad, occasionally making tiny, precise marks in the margins with a simple pen he held the way a person holds, a pen they have owned for a very long time. He was wearing a dark, unremarkable suit that looked exactly like it had been purchased straight off a rack in Baton Rouge, which it had. His hair was slightly disarranged, making him look exactly like a man who had gotten up early, driven to work, and was now reviewing paperwork before a meeting, which was exactly what he was doing. The committee chair finally gave the order to start the hearing. After brief opening statements, the floor was immediately yielded to Kennedy. He smoothly opened his thick folder to the very first tab, the red one marked One United. "Representative Waters, thank you for being here today," he began. "I want to start by saying that I have a great deal of respect for your years of service. 34 years is a long time. A lot of people don't do anything for 34 years, let alone serve in Congress." His distinct Louisiana drawl stretched the words out smoothly like taffy, making it sound entirely like a genuine compliment. Waters nodded slightly, graciously accepting the praise. "Now, ma'am, you served as chair of the House Financial Services Committee from 2019 to 2023. Before that, you were the ranking member for many years. In that role, you oversaw the regulation of banks, financial institutions, and the housing market. Is that a fair description?" "That is correct," Waters responded confidently. "I've spent my entire career fighting for financial accountability and protecting vulnerable consumers from predatory—" "Yes, ma'am, I deeply appreciate that," Kennedy interjected smoothly. "Let's talk about one bank in particular." He pulled out a document showing a timeline carefully handwritten on his legal pad, featuring specific dates on the left and corresponding events on the right. September 2008, the devastating financial crisis is fully underway. Banks are failing across the country. You, Representative Waters, arranged a highly exclusive meeting between top officials at the United States Department of Treasury and executives of One United Bank, a minority-owned bank based in Boston with operations in several states. He looked up from his legal pad directly into her eyes. "Your husband, Sidney Williams, was a major stockholder in One United Bank. He had recently served as a member of the bank's board of directors. At the exact time of the crucial meeting you arranged, he held stock worth between $250,000 and $500,000 in that specific bank. Is that correct?" "My husband's personal investments are his own business," Waters shot back defensively. "I arranged that meeting strictly on behalf of minority-owned banks generally, not—" "Ma'am, I'll definitely get to that," Kennedy said. His voice maintained the exact same volume and the same unhurried Louisiana pace. But the interruption was incredibly precise. It wasn't rude. It was surgical, much like a seasoned doctor who lets a patient describe their symptoms but firmly stops them before they attempt to diagnose themselves. One United Bank had been heavily invested in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. When the federal government took over those struggling entities, One United's capital was, in the exact words of federal regulators, all but wiped out. The bank desperately needed federal bailout money to survive. You arranged a private meeting with the Treasury. Your husband owned a massive amount of stock in the bank, and you notably did not disclose your deep financial ties to One United to the Treasury officials when you aggressively requested that meeting. He began reading directly from an Office of Congressional Ethics report. A former Bush administration official who helped arrange the meeting stated, and I am reading verbatim from the OCE report. "Learning of the connection was highly upsetting to me. This is something that was potentially politically explosive and deeply embarrassing to the department." Kennedy gently set down the heavy report. "The final result of the meeting and your subsequent advocacy was that One United Bank received $12 million in TARP bailout funds. $12 million. Your husband's massive stock portfolio in the bank was conveniently preserved." He pulled out yet another document from the folder. "Now let me tell you a little bit more about One United Bank. The bank your husband heavily invested in. The bank you personally helped bail out. Because the tragic story doesn't end with the $12 million. It gets significantly worse. After receiving the TARP money, taxpayer money, One United CEO, Kevin Cohey, was officially found to have used bank funds to purchase a luxury Porsche. A Porsche SUV, purchased directly with bank money for his own personal use. Federal regulators also clearly found that the struggling bank had made highly questionable loans to insiders. The FDIC eventually issued a strict cease and desist order against One United for utterly unsafe and unsound banking practices. This is the exact bank you went to bat for, ma'am. This is the bank your husband invested in. This is exactly where $12 million of hard-earned taxpayer dollars went to a failing bank whose CEO was busy buying Porsches with depositors' money. He took a slow sip of his black coffee. Now, your esteemed colleague, Barney Frank, the chairman of the Financial Services Committee at that time, a loyal Democrat, your political ally, a man who had absolutely no reason to undermine you. He explicitly told you to stay out of it. Those were his exact words. He said he would personally handle the matter and make sure minority-owned banks were fairly included in the massive bailout. He told you specifically and clearly that your direct involvement was a massive conflict of interest. He didn't whisper it in the hallway. He told you directly. And you absolutely did not stay out of it, ma'am. When your own committee chairman, a staunch liberal Democrat from Massachusetts who agrees with you on virtually everything, explicitly tells you that what you are doing is a blatant conflict of interest and you arrogantly do it anyway, that is not public service. That is something else entirely. Waters leaned aggressively into her microphone. I was officially cleared by the House Ethics Committee of all— Yes, ma'am, you were cleared. Let's talk deeply about exactly how, Kennedy interjected, seamlessly opening a second document. The House Ethics Committee investigated this matter for 3 long years. 3 years. For historical context, the entire Watergate investigation, from the initial break-in to a presidential resignation, took just 2 years and 2 months. Your ethics investigation took longer than the Watergate scandal. During that extensive investigation, the committee's own staff suffered internal disputes so incredibly severe that the lead attorney actually resigned. 2 senior investigators were suspended from duty. The investigation was publicly described by the Washington Post as being in absolute turmoil. The committee actually had to hold internal reviews of its own investigators while it was supposedly investigating you. It was a chaotic investigation of an investigation. And at the very end of 3 years of unprecedented chaos, the committee concluded that you had not personally violated the rules. He paused for dramatic effect. But your chief of staff, your own grandson, Mikail Moore, was absolutely not cleared. The committee explicitly found that his actions were, and I am quoting directly here, unambiguously intended to assist One United specifically. He received a formal, official reprimand. Your grandson, your chief of staff, the man who sat right outside your congressional office every single day doing exactly what you couldn't do yourself because of the glaring conflict of interest. He looked directly at Waters. Ma'am, you were technically cleared. Your grandson was officially reprimanded for doing exactly what you wanted done. Down in Louisiana, we have a very specific saying for that exact situation. I didn't pull the trigger, I just handed someone the loaded gun. But I'm genuinely trying to be polite today. My grandson's actions were his own independent decisions, and I, Waters, started to protest. Ma'am, he was your chief of staff, Kennedy countered smoothly. He worked directly for you. He sat directly outside your personal office. He carefully managed your daily schedule and your legislative priorities. And he took aggressive actions unambiguously intended to financially help your husband's bank. And after he received the formal reprimand, you kept him right on your staff. Kennedy picked up his coffee cup, took a measured sip, and set it back down. Ma'am, who got the money? One United, your husband's bank, got $12 million of taxpayer money. That is exactly who got the money. He deliberately turned to the second tab, the blue one labeled Family Payments. Representative Waters, in the year 2004, the Los Angeles Times published a massive investigation into your family's complex finances. The seasoned reporters, Chuck Neubauer and Ted Rohrlich, discovered that your close relatives had remarkably made more than $1 million in the preceding 8 years simply by doing lucrative business with companies, political candidates, and special causes that you had personally helped. $1 million in 8 years, he read directly from the clipped article. Your husband helped a company obtain lucrative government bond business. Your daughter, Karen Waters, successfully ran a slate mailer operation for your political campaign. Your son, Edward Waters, profited immensely from your political connections. When the press asked you about all of it, you calmly said, and this is a direct published quote, "They do their business and I do mine." Kennedy set down the newspaper article. Let's talk specifically about Karen's business, because it happens to be the most fascinating one. He pulled out a thick stack of official FEC filings. Your daughter Karen runs the highly profitable slate mailer operation for your official campaign committee. Let me briefly explain to the audience watching at home how this brilliant system actually works, because it is truly ingenious. I will gladly give you that, ma'am. It is genuinely clever. Here is the exact mechanism. Ambitious candidates running for political office in California City Council, State Assembly, local school board, judges, whatever they desperately want your endorsement. Your name carries immense weight, especially in South LA and in powerful Democratic circles statewide. So, they pay your campaign committee a hefty fee, anywhere from $250 to a staggering $45,000. And in direct exchange, they get their name prominently printed on a glossy slate mailer right alongside your powerful endorsement. The mailer goes out to thousands of voters who deeply trust you. The voters see your familiar name at the very top and naturally assume that everyone listed underneath has your personal, vetted backing. Karen's consulting company expertly manages the entire operation. She designs the mailers, she handles the expensive printing, she carefully manages the distribution, she collects the massive fees, and Karen is paid a very generous consulting fee for running it all. He began reading numbers directly from the official FEC filings, speaking slowly and letting each massive figure settle heavily over the quiet room. Over the past 2 decades, Karen Waters has been paid significantly more than $650,000 directly from your campaign committee for this exact work. $650,000. Her company, a company whose sole, exclusive product is literally your name, has been one of the absolute largest single recipients of your campaign fund. Ma'am, let me make absolutely sure I understand this system correctly. Political candidates pay your campaign for the sheer privilege of appearing on a piece of paper with your name. Your daughter runs the entire operation and is paid directly from those same campaign funds. The primary product being sold is your personal endorsement, your acquired political capital, your 34 years of influence in Congress, and the person happily collecting the massive check is your own daughter. He looked up from the documents. In literally any other industry on earth, that is called a family business. And there is absolutely nothing inherently wrong with running a family business, unless the family business is supposed to be a federal congressional office. Ma'am, your daughter makes $650,000 routinely selling your endorsement. Your husband's chosen bank got $12 million in federal bailout money. Your grandson was officially reprimanded for helping that exact bank. Your son profited heavily from your connections, and when the Los Angeles Times directly asked you about all of it, you calmly said, and this is a direct quote that I truly think deserves to be repeated, "They do their business and I do mine." He set down the FEC filings and calmly picked up his coffee cup again. Ma'am, their business is your business. Their business completely ceases to exist without your powerful position. Karen absolutely cannot sell political endorsements if you are not sitting in Congress. Sydney's struggling bank absolutely does not get an exclusive Treasury meeting if you are not sitting on the banking committee. Mikail absolutely does not take questionable actions on behalf of One United if he is not officially your chief of staff. If you remove your name from every single transaction your family has made in the last 34 years, most of them instantly evaporate. The money flows purely because you sit in that chair. Every single dollar your family has made ultimately traces back to one singular thing: your incredibly powerful seat in the United States Congress. Waters' voice suddenly rose, echoing loudly in the chamber. I have proudly served my community for 34 years, and I will absolutely not sit here and listen to a Republican from Louisiana openly impugn my family's integrity. Kennedy just waited, the exact same way he always waited. Coffee cup securely in hand, pen resting on his pad, expression entirely unchanged. He let her talk loudly until her voice completely ran out of furious fuel, which took exactly about 40 seconds. 40 seconds of pure volume in a room filled with sensitive microphones, rolling cameras, and a dedicated stenographer who dutifully typed every single word she yelled. When she finally finished, Kennedy replied calmly, "Ma'am, I didn't question your public service. I asked specific questions about your family's income. Those are vastly different questions. The main question is still sitting firmly on the table." He slowly turned to the third tab, the green one. He read one name out loud, Mikail Moore. "Ma'am, let's talk deeply about your grandson for a moment. Strict House rules explicitly prohibit members of Congress from hiring most family members. Parents, siblings, children, In-laws all strictly prohibited. But when you ultimately hired Mikail Moore as your powerful chief of staff, grandchildren were conveniently not on the prohibited list. It was a glaring loophole. You found it, and you gleefully used it. He pulled out an official letter. In early 2008, right before the Ethics Committee officially began its One United investigation, the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington wrote an urgent letter to the House Administration Committee, practically begging them to close this loophole. They specifically and repeatedly cited your hiring of Moore. They wrote, "Given the extensive nature of the list, it seems clear that Congress fully intended for federal employees to avoid hiring relatives. They specifically named you. They named Moore. The loophole somehow still existed, and you casually walked right through it." Moore was eventually reprimanded by the Ethics Committee. He was officially found to have taken actions specifically designed to financially benefit One United. And after the reprimand, he comfortably continued working in your office. Kennedy carefully set down the letter. "Ma'am, you found a convenient loophole in the nepotism rules just to hire your grandson. Your grandson then used his powerful position to financially help your husband's bank. When he was finally caught, he was reprimanded. When he was reprimanded, you boldly kept him. The loophole, the controversial hire, the unethical actions, the reprimand, the retention. Every single step of that entire chain leads to the exact same place, your family massively benefiting from your powerful position. Mikail is a highly talented professional who Waters attempted to defend him. Ma'am, the Ethics Committee didn't question his professional talent. They severely questioned his actions," Kennedy shot back. "And his actions were unambiguously intended to assist One United specifically. That's not my personal word. Unambiguously. That is the official committee's word. There was absolutely no ambiguity whatsoever about what he did. The only lingering ambiguity is exactly who told him to do it." He swiftly closed the green tab and smoothly opened the next one. He read the label again. District data. Kennedy's voice noticeably changed for this specific section. It wasn't louder, but it was much slower. The charming, unhurried drawl that had been somewhat disarming in the first 3 rounds became something else entirely. It sounded significantly less like a friendly chat on a front porch and much more like a stern prosecutor in a courtroom. "Representative Waters, you have continuously represented your district, now known as California's 43rd, since 1991. 34 years. The district includes much of southern Los Angeles as well as portions of Gardena, Inglewood, and Torrance. Let's talk seriously about those communities." He opened a thick folder filled with official census data and city reports. He began reading entirely without commentary, exactly the way a solemn doctor reads grim lab results to a terrified patient who already deeply suspects the tragic diagnosis. The official poverty rate in your district is significantly higher than both the California average and the national average. The median household income is significantly lower than the California average. Your district remains one of the absolute poorest in the entire state, in a state that famously has the highest cost of living in the entire nation. He turned a page. When you first took office in 1991, South LA tragically had one of the highest unemployment rates in the country. Now, in 2025, the unemployment rate in your district is remarkably still well above the state and national average. The economic needle has barely moved. 34 years of your leadership, and the economic trajectory of the vulnerable communities you represent has not meaningfully changed at all. He pulled out a sobering printout of Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority data. Los Angeles County is currently in the middle of a catastrophic homelessness crisis that has been steadily building for decades. Your specific district is one of the undeniable epicenters. Tragic tent encampments completely line sidewalks that your hard-working constituents have to walk their children past every single day on the way to school. Desperate people sleep in cars on residential streets, where proud families have lived for generations. Every single shelter is completely at maximum capacity. The horrific numbers have gotten worse, not better, during your long tenure. When you first took office, homelessness in LA County was certainly a problem. Today, it is an unmitigated crisis, and the communities in your district have been ground zero for that tragic crisis for the entire time you've held political office. He slowly turned another page. Crime rates in your district remain heavily elevated. Violent crime in parts of South LA exceeds the state average by very significant margins. School performance in your district's public schools consistently trails the state average in basic reading, in math, and in overall graduation rates. Economic development has been uneven at best, and utterly non-existent in the specific blocks that need it the absolute most. He closed the heavy data folder. Now let me make absolutely sure I have this right. In 34 years, your district is still incredibly poor, still vastly underserved, still highly dangerous, and still struggling deeply with the exact same horrific problems it had the very year you were elected. The public schools are still failing. The streets are still unsafe. The families are still struggling paycheck to paycheck. He paused to let the reality set in. And in those exact same 34 years, your husband miraculously made massive money from a failing bank you personally helped bail out. Your daughter comfortably made $650,000 routinely selling your name. Your grandson was officially reprimanded for corruption. Your immediate family happily earned over $1 million simply from your political connections. And you bought a luxury house. Let's talk about that house. He pulled out a single, stark sheet of paper containing one undeniable fact, one specific address. You live in Hancock Park. For the people watching at home who don't know the geography of Los Angeles, Hancock Park is one of the absolute wealthiest, most exclusive neighborhoods in the entire city. It features historic, sprawling mansions hidden behind wrought iron gates and tree-lined streets, where the massive houses literally have their own name. The median home price there is well over $2 million. There are private security patrols and immaculately landscaped yards. It is the exact kind of neighborhood where the biggest daily problem is someone accidentally parking a Mercedes in front of your sprawling driveway. Your personal home has been formally estimated at approximately $6 million. He let the massive number land heavily. $6 million. In a room where he had just been asking about $12 million in bailout money and $650,000 in slate mailer fees, the number $6 million felt exactly like the final, crushing weight that made the moral scale completely tip over. Hancock Park is not in your district, ma'am. You represent South LA, but you live in Hancock Park. The physical distance between your luxurious front door and the nearest boundary of your suffering district is approximately 2 miles. 2 miles on a simple map. But the devastating distance between the median income in your wealthy neighborhood and the median income in the desperate communities you represent, that distance is measured in decades of backbreaking wages. The people you represent simply cannot afford to live on your street. Most of them cannot even afford to live in your zip code. Some of them currently sleep in cars on streets less than 5 miles from your $6 million home. He looked intently at Waters. 34 years, ma'am. You have continuously represented some of the poorest, most vulnerable communities in California for 34 years. During those 34 years, your family has earned millions from your powerful position. Your husband's bank got a $12 million bailout. Your daughter earned $650,000 selling your political endorsement. Your grandson was reprimanded for helping the bank, and you bought a $6 million mansion completely outside the district you represent. Ma'am, who got the money because your district absolutely didn't get it? Your communities didn't get it. The desperate people in South LA who dutifully vote for you every 2 years, and whose streets still have the exact same potholes and the exact same crime and the exact same crushing poverty they had in 1991, they didn't get the money. Your family got the money. The money went straight to Hancock Park every single time. Waters erupted with a fury that shook the room. Her loud voice filled the hearing room the exact way it had filled hearing rooms for 3 decades. Loud, righteous, and absolutely furious. I have fought for my community for 34 years. I have brought billions of dollars in federal funding directly to South LA. I have stood up fearlessly against every single president who ever tried to cut vital services to my people. How dare you sit there? And Kennedy did not even flinch. He calmly held his coffee cup exactly halfway between the wooden table and his mouth, acting exactly as if he had been about to take a casual sip and the aggressive shouting had simply caused him to politely pause. He waited. He waited the way he always waited, with the endless patience of a man who has fundamentally learned that sheer volume is not a substitute for an argument, and that profound silence, when properly timed, is significantly louder than any human voice. Waters finally finished her tirade. The room was literally ringing from the echo. Kennedy calmly took the sip of coffee he had been patiently holding, set the cup gently down, and spoke. Ma'am, I didn't question your fighting. I don't doubt you fought hard. I'm questioning your actual results. Fighting and winning are 2 vastly different things. Your community is poorer than when you started. Your family is vastly richer. Those 2 undeniable facts sit right side by side, and they don't need any commentary from me. They speak quite loudly for themselves. He moved forward, significantly faster now. Representative Waters, in June of 2018, you made highly public statements actively encouraging people to confront members of the Trump administration in public places. You said, and I have the official transcript right here, if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd, and you push back on them, and you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere. He read the words entirely without inflection. The words were inflammatory enough entirely on their own, completely without his help. In 1992, during the devastating Los Angeles riots following the Rodney King verdict, you controversially described the deadly riots as a rebellion and publicly led a chant of "No justice, no peace." Over 60 people tragically died. Over 2,000 were severely injured. $1 billion in catastrophic property damage occurred, much of it located directly in the very communities you represent. He quickly turned a page. In April of 2021, during the highly tense trial of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd, you specifically traveled to Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, and told angry demonstrators while the jury was still actively deliberating, "We've got to stay on the street and we've got to get more confrontational." The presiding trial judge, Peter Cahill, specifically said, "Your comments were abhorrent," and legally stated that they could be valid grounds for an appeal that might actually overturn the entire verdict. Kennedy deliberately set down the transcript. "Ma'am, you chaired the House Financial Services Committee. You heavily oversaw the complex regulation of the entire American banking system. That is a massively important position that strictly requires judgment, restraint, and precision. And in your highly public life, you have actively called for angry people to confront officials at gas stations, described deadly riots as a rebellion, and nearly caused a catastrophic mistrial in the absolute most important civil rights case in a generation. There is a massive difference between fighting for your community and dangerously inciting your community. 34 years, and that crucial line is apparently still very blurry for you. You are aggressively trying to criminalize black protest. And I will absolutely not." Waters fired back. "Ma'am, I'm not criminalizing anything. I'm simply reading transcripts. Your exact transcripts. Every single word I've said tonight came directly from an official document, a legal filing, or a recording. If your own unedited words sound exactly like dangerous incitement, the problem is definitely not with the person reading them." He quickly added one more damaging item. "After your 2018 comments about aggressively confronting officials, your very own party leadership strongly criticized you. Nancy Pelosi, your longtime colleague, your political ally, a fellow California Democrat, issued a formal statement saying your comments were completely unacceptable. Chuck Schumer said they were strictly not American. These are not Republicans, ma'am. This is your own party leadership. And regarding the Chauvin trial, let me be incredibly specific about what the judge actually said. Judge Cahill stated directly on the official record that your comments were abhorrent and said they could easily give the defense valid grounds for appeal on any guilty verdict. You very nearly destroyed the vital conviction of the man who callously murdered George Floyd. The black community you constantly claimed to fight for desperately wanted that conviction more than anything else in the world, and you very nearly took it away from them. Not because you were fighting for justice, but simply because you couldn't stop performing for the television cameras." Kennedy finally set the thick transcript down. "Ma'am, I've been in public life for a very long time. I've seen people who genuinely fight for communities, and I've seen people who fight exclusively in front of cameras. They're almost never the same people. The ones who truly fight for communities tend to do it quietly, in committee rooms, with detailed legislation and careful amendments and phone calls. The ones who fight in front of cameras tend to do it incredibly loudly, with catchy sound bites and angry slogans, and then they quietly go home to their mansions in Hancock Park." Kennedy had finally reached the final section of his presentation. He meticulously closed all of the colored folders, stacked them neatly, and placed them carefully to his left. Then, he picked up his yellow legal pad, the exact same one he'd had since the very beginning of the evening, the one covered in blue ink and careful handwriting, and he slowly stood up. He absolutely did not need to stand. Senators very rarely stand during hearings. The deliberate act of rising, slowly pushing back his chair, meticulously straightening his suit jacket, and holding the yellow legal pad in one hand like a preacher tightly holding a Bible completely changed the energy in the room. It changed the room exactly the way a stern judge standing up completely changes a courtroom. Everyone immediately sat up straighter. Waters' expensive attorney entirely stopped writing. The camera operators rapidly adjusted their angles to capture the moment. "Let's put it all together, ma'am," he announced. 34 years in Congress. Let me read the final ledger. He began reading directly from his legal pad, where he had handwritten each damning item on its own distinct line in blue ink, in the careful script of a man who firmly believes in writing important things down by hand. He read them incredibly slowly, significantly slower than he had spoken all evening, because this was absolutely not a cross-examination anymore. This was the final closing statement, and the jury was everyone watching across the country. Your husband held massive stock in One United Bank. You personally arranged a Treasury meeting for that exact bank. The bank received $12 million in TARP bailout funds. Barney Frank, from your own party, your own committee chairman, explicitly told you to stay out of it. You completely ignored him and didn't stay out of it. Your grandson served as your powerful chief of staff by slipping through a convenient loophole in the nepotism rules. He was formally reprimanded for taking actions unambiguously intended to financially assist One United. You comfortably kept him on your staff after the severe reprimand. Your daughter has earned significantly more than $650,000 running a highly questionable slate mailer operation that literally sells your endorsement to ambitious candidates and causes. Your relatives earned more than $1 million in 8 short years entirely from businesses deeply connected to your political activities. You said they do their business and I do mine. The Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, a notably liberal watchdog organization and absolutely not a Republican group, listed you as one of the absolute most corrupt members of Congress 4 separate times: 2005, 2006, 2009, 2011, 4 times. The FEC heavily fined your campaign committee $68,000. You aggressively called for people to confront officials at gas stations. You described deadly riots as a rebellion. A sitting judge said your comments very nearly caused a catastrophic mistrial. Your district, South LA, remains one of the poorest in all of California. It has the exact same poverty, the exact same crime, the exact same failing schools, 34 years of the exact same misery. And you happily live in a $6 million mansion in wealthy Hancock Park, completely outside your district, on a perfectly manicured street that the very people you represent could not even afford to walk through, if walking through cost money. He slowly set down the yellow legal pad. "Ma'am, every single time I asked where the money went tonight, the answer was always the exact same. One United, your husband's bank. Karen, your daughter. Mikail, your grandson. Sydney, your husband. The answer was never South LA. The answer was never Inglewood. The answer was never Gardena. The answer was always your family, every single time." He deliberately looked at the cameras, ignoring Waters, speaking directly to the millions watching at home. 34 years, ma'am. Same question. Same answer. Who got the money? He finally sat down, picked up his coffee cup, took one final sip, and set it down. He meticulously straightened his legal pad and perfectly aligned his pen with the pad's edge. They were the precise movements of a diligent man who had finished a hard day of work and was putting his tools away. The main camera turned sharply to Waters. She sat completely frozen. Her attorney was frantically writing something on a notepad and desperately sliding it toward her, but she did not read it. Her hands were planted flat on the wooden table. Her mouth was set in a severe, tight line, the carefully practiced expression of a person who has been in public life long enough to know exactly what her face looks like on high-definition television, desperately controlling it through sheer force of will. She did not respond to Kennedy's closing statement. "Representative Waters, would you like to make a final closing statement?" the committee chair asked. Waters leaned heavily into the microphone. "I have served the people of South Los Angeles for 34 years. I have relentlessly fought against redlining, predatory lending, housing discrimination, and every single form of economic injustice targeting vulnerable communities of color. Nothing said in this highly partisan hearing changes that flawless record." Kennedy did not react. He was simply writing something down on his pad, not bothering to look up. The hearing abruptly ended, and the gavel fell heavily. As the massive room began to empty out, Waters slowly stood up. She moved noticeably slower than when she had confidently walked in, not frail, but with the heavy gait of someone realizing the room they are leaving is fundamentally different from the one they entered. Her team quickly closed tightly around her. The attorney snapped his notepad into his briefcase. The communications director stared at her phone in sheer horror, reading exactly what the internet was already loudly saying about her boss. In the crowded hallway outside, eager reporters lined the corridor with microphones up and cameras rolling. Waters had confidently walked this exact hallway hundreds of times over her career, always stopping to provide the fiery sound bites that cable news networks happily looped for 24 straight hours. This time, she walked briskly past every microphone without stopping. Her attorney barked. The representative's official statement speaks entirely for itself. Then, a lone reporter at the end of the line loudly called out, "Representative Waters, who got the money?" It was Kennedy's devastating question, aggressively asked by a normal person who had simply watched the broadcast. Waters did not turn around. Her hurried step did not change, but her attorney's jaw tightened visibly, and the communications director looked back briefly before catching herself and staring straight forward. The first video clip to go viral was miraculously not about the shady family payments or the $6 million mansion. It was a simple 11-second clip. It featured Waters loudly shouting, "I have fought for my community for 34 years," followed immediately by Kennedy holding his coffee cup completely motionless, patiently waiting, and then saying in his unhurried drawl, "Ma'am, I didn't question your fighting, I'm questioning your results." The absolute split, her booming volume juxtaposed against his utter stillness, became the defining image, edited side by side with the caption, "Reclaiming my time versus accounting for my money." It garnered an astonishing 41 million views in just 3 days. The second viral clip was the brutal Hancock Park moment. "You live in a $6 million mansion outside the district you represent. The people you represent cannot afford to live on your street." This was shared not only by gleeful conservatives, but by deeply frustrated South LA residents who had known for years where their wealthy representative lived, but had never heard it said aloud in a powerful congressional hearing. The third massive clip was simply the very last question. "Who got the money, ma'am?" 34 years, same question, same answer. It instantly became much more than a meme. It became a profound question that ordinary people suddenly started asking about other corrupt politicians in completely different contexts. It worked perfectly because it was incredibly simple to ask, and completely devastating enough that nobody in power wanted to answer it. The fallout was immediate and severe. The Congressional Black Caucus released a carefully worded statement the following morning. "We fully support transparency and accountability for all members of Congress." The statement conspicuously did not mention Waters by name, defend her lengthy record, or criticize Kennedy. It was the unmistakable language of political distance. When 3 CBC members were asked on camera if they supported Waters specifically, 2 simply said, "I support transparency," and 1 nervously replied, "I haven't reviewed the full transcript." None of them said, "I support Maxine Waters." Even Hakeem Jeffries carefully dodged the fallout on MSNBC. Representative Waters has a long and distinguished record of public service. Routine oversight hearings are simply a normal part of the legislative process. He deliberately employed, distinguished, yet absolutely avoided innocent. By strategically ignoring One United Bank and the Hancock Park mansion, everyone actively covering Washington politics understood exactly what that deliberate evasion meant. The consequences escalated rapidly. The House Ethics Committee announced a strict preliminary review of the massive slate mailer payments to Karen Waters. Concurrently, the FEC opened an audit inquiry into her campaign. On Capitol Hill, a bipartisan group swiftly introduced the Congressional Nepotism Reform Act, explicitly adding grandchildren to the prohibited hires list. While Fox News ran the devastating clips continuously, the most damaging coverage emerged from unexpected places. On CNN, a prominent Democratic strategist bluntly admitted, "The Hancock Park detail is going to be incredibly difficult to explain. When your representative comfortably lives in a $6 million home outside the struggling community she represents, that's not a cheap Republican talking point. That's a verifiable geographical fact." MSNBC featured an urban policy expert who stated, "The real question is whether 34 years of representation should produce absolutely zero measurable improvement for the community while the representative's family massively prospers." Furthermore, the Los Angeles Times ran a massive follow-up piece titled, "20 years later, the exact same questions remain," carefully noting her daughter's highly lucrative financial patterns remained completely unchanged. Down in South LA, Gerald Davis watched the hearing on a television inside his humble Vermont Avenue barbershop. Gerald, 62, had faithfully voted for Waters since 1992. His shop had miraculously survived violent riots, crushing recessions, and a global pandemic. When Kennedy read the Hancock Park address, Gerald silently muted the television, staring at Waters' face. A customer casually asked, "You know she don't actually live around here, right? Then why do we keep voting for her?" Gerald didn't answer. He simply finished the haircut. The next morning, he taped a single paper to his mirror, reading, "Who got the money?" He wrote no name, but everyone knew what it meant. Just 3 short blocks away, Patricia watched on her phone inside her cramped daycare. A resident for 40 years, she had warmly shaken Waters' hand at church. When Kennedy bluntly noted the district was poorer than before, Patricia turned off her phone in profound silence. The next time a canvasser handed her a Waters flyer, she simply said, "I'm actually thinking about it this time." In 40 years of voting, she had never once said that. The highly profitable slate mailer operation soon reported a massive 35% drop in total revenue. 3 nervous candidates asked for their money back immediately. 2 were sternly told payments were non-refundable. 1 actually hired a lawyer. 2 other candidates quietly dropped their interest altogether. Karen Waters' exorbitant consulting fee remained the same. The number of clients did not. Waters absolutely did not announce her retirement. Maxine Waters simply does not surrender. But she did quietly cancel 2 major speaking engagements, vaguely citing scheduling conflicts. One prominently canceled event was at an Inglewood church, where she had spoken every year for 15 straight years. Meanwhile, a well-respected Inglewood City Council member, a woman who actually grew up and lived inside the district quietly, began holding community meetings. When a reporter boldly asked if she was considering running for Congress, she smoothly replied, "I'm currently focused entirely on serving my community." When asked directly about Waters, she simply said, "I actively live in the district I serve." 6 simple words. Kennedy was finally caught by a Fox News reporter in the hallway. "Senator, Representative Waters passionately says she's fought for her community for 34 years. Do you disagree?" Kennedy stopped completely. "I don't doubt she's fought," he said softly. "A whole lot of people fight. The real question isn't whether you fought. The question is who actually won. Because after 34 years, her community looks exactly the same, and her family looks a whole lot richer. I just count things, and the count simply doesn't add up." He turned and walked away. And forever after that fateful night, every single time Maxine Waters confidently demanded, "Reclaiming my time," or aggressively pointed her finger at someone else's alleged corruption, 4 devastating words would forever echo, "Who got the money, ma'am?"